Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, once again, we come to you by way of Zoom. You all stay safe and well. How about this? Cocktails on the go. Heroes in the fight against coronavirus. But first, some counties go their own way. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome, Philadelphia Inquirer reporter Angela Couloumbis. I hope you and your family are safe and well.
Thank you, Terry. To you too.
Well, the big news that in the past week has been, and I've been putting it this way, some counties go their own way. Explain what that means to our viewers.
So there has been over the last 2 months a lot of emotions going on in various communities who have been closed nearly for 2 months, and people are starting to feel the pain. They are out of work. They're trying to get through to an unemployment line to collect unemployment. Businesses are trying to make do with the loans that they're getting. If they're getting them from state and federal government. So some of the counties have started to rebel against Governor Wolf's closures orders. And those orders essentially say that all non-life sustaining businesses have to remain closed, and people's movements are being very limited. You can only go out. And even though he's starting to reopen certain sections of the state, there are other counties that are still under complete lockdown. They're still in the so-called red phase. And they're saying enough. We need to start reopening. We feel that we can safely do so. We have the testing in place. We have the contact tracing in place. And we can implement all kinds of different health strategies to ensure that cases don't spike as we reopen. Now, these are counties that include places like Lancaster and Lebanon in our area that as of now are saying we're going to open up even though they are in the red phase. And there are all kinds of different metrics that the administration has placed on counties before that they can reopen. And some of these counties feel like they've met them or can meet them. And as a result, there's a big fight in the works, and the governor has said in no uncertain terms, if you reopen before we direct and say it's okay for you to reopen, you risk losing critical federal coronavirus funding.
Yeah, and the other thing is he's also said you could lose your license to do, whatever business you're in, and there's a certain liability to it. And the governor used language cowardly when he approached this issue. And in following Governor Wolf's career, that's the first time I've ever heard him use that kind of language. Now, you've been covering him as well.
Absolutely. You nailed it on the head. I have never really heard him use that type of forceful language. And even throughout this pandemic, he has said that even though there are these orders in place, he's not necessarily enforcing them. He's relying on self-enforcement by people and businesses. So this was probably the strongest language I've heard him use, most certainly in the last 2 months against counties or businesses that go rogue, and even in the 6 years that I've been covering him.
Yeah, I mean, and some county officials, district attorneys, for example, and others say they're not going to go out and prosecute people who violate the governor's executive order, dealing with all of this, correct?
That's correct. But as you mentioned earlier, there could be other implications. There could be loss of licenses. There could be insurance implications for these businesses. And those are real implications at a time when people and businesses are already, particularly small businesses, are already struggling to stay afloat. And they could be enough to really, even in counties that decide to open earlier than the governor allows, you could see that many businesses might decide that it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are many small shops that, are likely not to reopen, particularly when you get into restaurants and bars and other kinds of activities. And 37 counties are now under some phase of reopening.
Correct.
Which is a majority of the 67. But in the southeastern part of our state, in particular, it's closure, closure, closure.
Yes, and what you've also seen happening parallel to this is that some counties are, particularly in the Southeast, are really pushing for cases involving nursing homes and other congregate care facilities to be removed from the calculation of reopening. Because what we've seen is that there are many cases now happening concentrated in these hotspots, in nursing homes, in prisons, and other congregate care facilities. And because of that, if those cases are counted towards the total, there is the very real possibility that these counties won't be reopening for months.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. All right. Coming up, heroes in the fight against coronavirus. We'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. Joining me is Dr. Lawrence John. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Well, doctor, I'll tell you, I've been promoting your appearance here by chatting about, guess what? Heroes on the front line in fighting the coronavirus. There are many, many heroes, but among them are doctors, you've got nurses, you've got other hospital personnel. The pressure on physicians has to be enormous. And I mean, their lives, and many of them have come down with coronavirus because of it's just almost inevitable.
Terry, good morning, and thank you so much again for having me. It's great to see you again. You're absolutely right. In our past visits, we've talked about physician burnout, and now this coronavirus has added an entirely new layer of stress and concern for physicians. Not only physicians and nurses and respiratory therapists, everybody in the medical profession and the front lines have been serving these COVID-19 patients. And you're absolutely right. They actually put their life on the line. Many of the healthcare providers have come down with COVID-19. You never know what you're walking into. But we have DNA that says we're here to serve, and we're very dedicated to our patients. And as you can see around the country, the medical profession has stepped up and has performed absolutely magnificently in taking care of these COVID-19 patients.
Do you think we're going to have a physician shortage as a result of it? As everybody, experts have said, this is likely to go on for some time until we get a vaccine, which could be, 9 months to a year. Who knows for sure? But the bottom line is, are we going to have a physician shortage?
I think medicine is going to look a lot different as we come through this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, the older physicians will have to reevaluate if they want to continue to expose themselves to the virus. The younger physicians are going to be torn with family responsibilities, loans, and really protecting their total environment. So I think physicians will be looking to having technology help them and protect them against this COVID-19. I think telemedicine has been a very good example of how we're going to adjust and try to make things a little better for the physicians. Telemedicine has increased probably 80% in its use, and this is a way that we can serve our patients and yet not be exposed to the virus.
Yeah, I want to come back to telemedicine, but first, let's go to another important topic that has some element of controversy to it, and that's medical liability immunity. And I know you have, thoughts about it that are important. So weigh in on, first of all, explain when the term medical liability immunity, I'm making sure I get it correct. Explain that to the folks.
Certainly. Well, last week in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I wrote a letter to the governor asking for medical immunity, medical liability immunity for physicians who are taking care of the COVID-19 patients. What we asked for is, since this is a novel virus and we don't have a really roadmap, we don't have real standard of care, this has been a steep learning curve for us in taking care of patients with COVID-19. And sometimes the outcomes aren't necessarily what you had hoped, but through no fault of the physician, things just may not go the way you wanted them. And we felt that the physicians should have liability immunity, which means that if you had a bad outcome, they wouldn't be held and wouldn't be sued, and there wouldn't be a malpractice case brought against them. We're all learning about this virus. We're all learning about how to take care of it. We're all learning about the new therapies, and sometimes things just don't go the way you'd like. And so the governor did, in fact, sign an executive order which gave liability immunity to the physicians, but he only gave it to the physicians working in nursing homes and in hospitals. Now, in my case, my office is right across from the hospital. So I could go over to the hospital and have medical liability immunity and then come back to my office and not have medical liability immunity. And that creates some confusion. So the governor really should extend the immunity to all the physicians.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about telemedicine. And it looks like, yes, it's important now, but it could be the way of the future. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, I'm chatting with Dr. Lawrence John. He's the president of Pennsylvania Medical Society. Well, doctor, let's get to it. Telemedicine, it's become very, very important. I've used it, and I'm sure many of our viewers have used it, and it's not likely to go away anytime soon. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right, Terry. We have found that telemedicine has become quite satisfactory to the doctor and to the patients. Many patients are reassured that they're able to see and talk to their doctor. They're able to go over many problems such as medicine lists, complications, renewing medications, new symptoms they may have. Tests can be ordered over telemedicine. And we have found it to be very efficient in getting to the patient, and we've been very pleased with the results.
Obviously, it has its limits, however. I mean, I used it, and I could send a picture of, something that I wanted the doctor to see, and he could see it, and that worked out well. And is this going to only mature as time goes on and grow and become much more important of healthcare delivery?
Yes, and I think the technology will advance so that the limitations that you speak of may be less moving forward. We may be able to listen to the heart. We may be able to listen to the lungs. We may be able to look into the ear. A lot of these things may be able to be accomplished through the iPhone. So the limitations you speak about are actual, and we are concerned about that. But if we notice something over telemedicine that concerns us, then we can tell the patient they need to be seen or they need to go to the emergency room, and then we can make up for those limitations that the telemedicine may have.
Another important aspect of medicine is now you can, again, go back to your physician's office in person. You also have the possibility of elective surgery. That seems to be back on the table, and it looks like more and more, patients are going back and seeing their physicians and going through elective surgery.
Yes, now that the governor has lifted the stay-at-home order, we can now get back to doing these elective surgeries that are so necessary. patients who might need stents in their heart. They may need a new knee. They may need a cataract done. These patients have needed these surgeries for some time, and they've been patient. And in our institution, what we are doing is we're ordering a COVID-19 test 4 days before the surgery, and we're ordering another COVID test 2 days before the surgery. So we know that the patient has not been exposed and does not have COVID-19 at the time of their surgeries. As far as coming back to the doctor's offices, the patients are going to see something a little different now. When they come to the doctor's office, they may be given a mask. They should have a mask on. The doctor will have a mask on. The staff will have a mask on. There certainly won't be the handshaking and the touching that maybe went on before. The rooms will be very much sanitized and cleaned very thoroughly in between each patient. The patient's temperature will be taken, and they'll be given a brief history questionnaire to make sure they haven't had any exposure to anybody with COVID-19. So I believe it's very safe for the patients to return to the doctor's offices, but the visit's going to look a little different than it did before.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I not to personalize it, but I've been to see a physician, and I was, first of all, the only one in the waiting room. I think they're scheduling so you don't have 15, 20 people in a waiting room, and it's all very important. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. Come back soon and provide us with another update. All right, coming up, imagine this, cocktails on the go. I never thought I'd be talking about that subject on Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Well, imagine this, cocktails on the go. Joining me is Charlie Thompson with the Patriot News PennLive. I'll tell you what, Mr. Thompson, you and I have chatted over the years. I never thought we'd talk about cocktails on the go. You'll have to explain this to the folks in our audience.
Okay, well, yeah, we have of course, with the coronavirus pandemic, the bars and restaurants and hotel bars were among the first things to close when Governor Wolf started closing businesses across the state to try to stop the spread of the virus. And it seems like they're going to be about the last thing to reopen. So a lot of bar owners, restaurant owners are, really scrambling to try to keep their businesses afloat. So they came up with this idea of, hey, we're selling takeout food. Other takeout restaurants are open. Could we come up with a program where we could sell mixed drinks, cocktails, screwdrivers, margaritas, whatever your favorite drink of choice is? Could we sell them in takeout containers, just like a walk-away milkshake, right? And the idea has caught fire. It has passed the House and the Senate, and it's on its way to Governor Wolf's desk.
Is he going to sign it?
I've seen reports that suggest that he will sign it. When I tried to get that directly from them yesterday, they just said that the governor is going to review the bill. So a little suspense there, but it sounds like it's possible. But it sounds like such a frivolous topic, doesn't it? Here in this age of doom and gloom, but kind of funny. But there is a serious business aspect to it.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly go to, imagine this, vote by mail. More than 1 million Pennsylvanians have now cast their ballots by mail. Talk a little bit about that and why that's become important.
Yeah. Well, again, as like everything, it's all about the coronavirus, isn't it, Terry? There's been a big push to there's been a big fear that bringing the general public out to concentrated spots on election day to cast ballots like we always do, and people repeatedly using the same machines, touch pads, pens, things like that, is probably a good way to give that COVID-19 virus a little bit of an extra boost. So Wolf, John Fetterman, many candidates parties even have been really urging that Pennsylvanians explore the new mail-in ballot process that was approved and signed into law last year as part of some election reforms. And this is really new. It's the first time we've always had the ability for people to cast absentee ballots if they were traveling and going to be out of town on election day or something like that. But this is essentially absentee balloting on demand. And it's kicked in, and a lot of people, as you mentioned, I think it's over 1 million now, have requested mail-in ballots.
Folks have to get the mail-in ballot, get the application in by the 26th of this month, and they have to have it into the county by 8 o'clock on the evening of June 2nd. And there's some concern that it could be postmarked before June 2nd, but not get into the county offices until the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th. And, you know, that could create a potential problem, correct?
Yes. And I think the advice that I've heard people give, including the Secretary of State, was that if you are cutting it close, if you're doing a mail-in ballot and you're kind of last minute about it, then you have the option of hand delivering it to your county voter registration office or Bureau of Elections office, and they are supposed to take it in person up until 8 o'clock on election day. So if it's the day before, 2 days before, that is probably more advisable for people to hand deliver it. And that kind of defeats the purpose of the convenience of it. But they're urging people to try to cast those ballots 3 or 4 days in advance, so you don't have that mail overlap problem.
And there's one other aspect to it. If you vote, we have less than a minute. If you vote in person, you better check where you're going to vote, because counties are able to collapse the precincts. And so instead of having one vote, you go to your precinct, there may be 3 or 4 voters in 3 or 4 precincts that have now moved to a new location in a school gym to, some larger facility.
Yes, because of the concerns that poll workers are basically want to sit this one out because of the coronavirus. The legislature did give counties the ability to condense the number of polling stations, and that is happening in many counties.
I have to cut you off. We're out of time. Great update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, you all stay well.